Hi, welcome to the third episode of YPO at Home. I'm the music director, CHEN. Welcome. With great pleasure, I'll introduce you to today's host, a good friend of the orchestra, well-known radio host from WQXR, Bob Sherman, together with a special host, a great flautist from the orchestra, Adam Ray. So I'm gonna sit back and pass the baton to Bob and Adam. Enjoy the show today.
Well, thank you, Tong. Hello, everybody. It is a very exciting time to think of bringing the orchestra into your home, since you can't get out, and the orchestra can't get out to the concert hall either. So one by one, we'll meet some of the great players who make up the ensemble. And starting off, Adam Ray, who is, how long have you been flutist with the Junkersville now?
20 years, I would say. I took 2 years or 3 years off in 2004 just to pursue some different employment opportunities. But I've been family with the orchestra for about 20 years now.
And you were born in Yonkers, right?
Yes, born and raised. Yes, definitely.
Did you ever go to a Yonkers Philharmonic concert when you were growing up?
I hadn't. I didn't learn about the Yonkers Philharmonic really until I started attending Saunders High School.
Uh-huh. And was it in high school that you picked up the flute for the first time?
No, I actually picked up the flute for the first time. It was in 5th grade. I was in Mrs. McElvaney's class. We had a school assembly, and the rest is history. I fell in love with it.
One of the things I did want to ask you, you've been involved with kids a lot.
Yes.
Involving them. When you were a kid, when you started in 5th grade, what attracted you to the music? How much help did you get from your colleagues, from the teachers, from the administrators, from the community itself?
Well, the teachers in my school, at School 25, once again, I started playing the flute in 5th grade during Mrs. McElvaney's class, and she was always very, very supportive. A lot of the teachers around me were very supportive. We didn't have the best instruments. You know, when I first began playing in 1995, I was playing on kind of like a beat up school instrument. It was a Bundy flute. One of the keys were falling apart. So I actually had to kind of develop my own way of playing. But I was introduced to the flute probably the first time watching it in 3rd grade. And every year in School 25, we would have assemblies and we'd have students and teachers kind of show up what instruments were what. And for 2 years, you know, I loved the flute. And finally in 5th grade, I had the chance and the opportunity to finally play.
Great, wonderful. One of the things I'm very curious about, you play in the orchestra. We also will talk later. I think you still play in the Lehman College Orchestra. So the question is, what does an orchestra player, first chair in the case of the Yonkers, what are your responsibilities? Yeah, you got to play the notes that are in the music, but what else do you do as a principal? What do you do? You beat up the rest of the section? I mean, what's the procedure?
No, there's no bloodshed. What happens, for the Yonkers Philharmonic, I played principal during the summer concerts, and I'm primarily the second flute player and the piccolo player. And one of the biggest obstacles and things are to add a great color, have different, make sure that you're blending with the other families of the orchestra, like the strings, the brass instruments, and pretty much just lead off with a lot of solos and a lot of fast notes usually. So yes,
that's now, you've also played with the Lehman College Band. Is that a very different experience, band versus orchestra?
Yes, it is. You have different instruments. For example, you have more saxophones, alto, all the way down to baritone saxophone. There are also more families, I shouldn't say families, but there are more players per family of instrument. When I say per family, for example, in an orchestra, you usually would only have 2 clarinets, but in Lehman College, when I play with their concert band, which is ran through Alan Hollander, it's a great community band, there may be about 15 clarinets. And then with the flute section, there may be 15 flutes. So it's a little bit different because you have to blend a little bit better. Sometimes you have a dynamic marking and it says pianissimo, which means to play softly. You really have to make sure you're playing softly because you have 15 other flute players playing behind you. So the blending is definitely different between the different sections of the band. Definitely.
Well, it certainly makes a lot of sense. Now, what is specifically involved with playing the flute? You brought yours, I think. You have it there.
Oh, yes, definitely. I always have it handy. Yeah, so the flute is made into 3 parts. So you have the foot joint, which is the bottom part. Then you have your center joint or your middle joint and your head joint. And the head joint is the actual piece that you blow into. So just to show you, you have the components of the head joint. You have your embouchure plate and your embouchure hole. And the flutist puts their lips on the embouchure plate and blows an airstream. And there's a sharp edge that's actually right here on the embouchure plate. And that's what produces a sound. So I can blow into it right now just to demonstrate.
I was going to ask you, you can play just with the head joint?
Oh, yeah, definitely. So I'll press my lips right here. You cover part of about halfway of the hole or maybe a little bit more. And you blow a steady stream of air. And depending how tight I make my lips or relax, I may get a different pitch. So that was the first sound, this one. And if I tighten it, I can get a different pitch. And you can kind of do little things.
All right, now put on. You sound like a bird there. Now, all right, now put on the middle one and let's see what happens.
Yes. So typically,
play more notes, I guess.
Yeah. Typically you wouldn't play with just these two. The foot joint will add a little bit more stability. Typically, our right pinky will land on this key, but you can definitely play it without the foot joint.
Well, that sounds normal. I mean, to me, it sounds like a flute sounds.
Right.
So when you put the bottom joint on, you get an extra note, and you get a different tempo as well.
It'll lower your range. That's primarily what the foot joint is for. It has these 3 keys, extra keys, total about 20 keys on the flute, actually. Mm-hmm. And my lowest note without pressing the foot joint would be a low D. And I'll show you if I add these other fingers, it'll extend it to a low B. And that's pretty much the components of the flute. And then you can get funky and probably attach different parts, put the foot joint with where you attach the head joint, for some different types of color.
Do composers ask you to do specific things like that?
Contemporary composers, you'll find, for example, you have something called trumpet embouchure. So if I take off the foot joint and I remove the head joint, and now I'm actually just left with the middle joint. The trumpet embouchure is achieved. It's a different embouchure, different lip placement, and you're literally blowing into the middle joint to create different sounds, and you're forming your lips like you're playing a trumpet, hence the name trumpet embouchure. And you can get some different type of like safari sounds and add different colors. Have a lot of fun with it.
Well, it sounds like an Eastern kind of instrument when you do that.
Yes.
And composers will specifically ask you to do that? So
yeah, especially
you got to take the thing apart
Well, usually in the classical repertoire, you normally wouldn't see that. I'm sure that
Sure,
wasn't
sure.
on Bach's mind and a few of our major composers like Beethoven and Brahms. But as you start moving into late 20th century and early 21st century music, which orchestras are forced to play, you will see certain little different extended techniques and things that are asked of the flute because we're definitely a color instrument. So the composers definitely challenge us daily.
I could just visualize a band concert where you have to do that, and all 18 flutists are going to be at the same time taking the instrument apart. It should
Oh
be
yeah,
a
it'd be a
great
lot of
show.
fun. Definitely.
Well, listen, why don't you put the thing back together again and maybe play us a piece so we really would know what you and the instrument sound like put together.
Sure, definitely. Um, well, I guess since we're talking about definitely 20th century music, let's do Syrinx. Syrinx is by Claude Debussy.
Well, Adam, that was not only a beautiful piece, but beautiful playing, really shaped in a very, very heartwarming way. So Debussy,
Thank you.
Syrinx, and just great to hear that kind of a performance. How different is it for you? Now, we talked about the difference between a band playing and being part of an orchestra. What about solo? Do you project differently? Do you have to play louder or do something in any way different from what you would do when you're playing in an ensemble?
Um, well, I guess it would depend what type of piece. For example, maybe if you're playing, with a larger concert band and you're playing a march, that would be different from, if they're playing, like a four-ray piece or something that's very soft and melodic, So there's definitely different contrasting. But the biggest thing is just to use your ears and your wisdom and, try to figure it out. Just make sure it's not too overwhelming and too powerful for the other instruments.
Well, I must say it's a kind of a different world from us on the receiving end of all of this, but it's great to get, I don't know, sort of right next to each other. Do you enjoy chamber music?
Oh, definitely, definitely. You know, once you get through the fundamentals of playing the flute, just as far as learning your scales and different fingerings, you know, the flute for years has been, you know, classical music has been written for it. So definitely with different chamber groups. Actually, right now, I playing with Ellen Bardakoff, and she has the Bardakova ensemble. Actually, I think she played with your, I think your mother actually may have been her teacher at one point. But
Oh,
there's a
really?
quint. Yeah, yeah, yes. But there's a definitely a quintet that she has, and we're going to be putting out some music on July 14th or somewhere towards the end of July. So I'm excited about that. But that's also a little bit different because when you're in a smaller setting like a chamber group, which this is a quintet, you know, at some point throughout every piece, someone has their time on the floor. You know, you're on stage, you know, it's really relaxing and it's more solo work. But once again, somebody else gets on stage, you have to kind of fall back and kind of blend. So
Right. It's
it's a little
funny you
bit different.
mentioned July 14th, which happens to be my mother's birthday.
Get out of here. I have to
Yeah,
let,
so
funny, I have to let Ellen know. Awesome.
mother always said they're dancing in the streets in Paris on my birthday because it's also
Oh,
school day. So,
I love it. I love it. That's
and
awesome.
now that I do a folk show called Woody's Children, it's Woody Guthrie's birthday also. So it's a
Oh, get out of here. Oh, yeah, you're right. You're right.
pretty good,
So
pretty
I
good.
guess it was a good day to be born.
Yeah. Listen, there has been so much discussion recently about the Afro-American experience, the discrimination, the mindset that so many of us have that is just altogether miscued. Have you
Yes.
faced discrimination or I don't know if that's the right word, but have you faced problems because of that situation?
I have. Yes, I have. You know, I remember I didn't really experience it musically until I was accepted into All City Band. When I first started the flute, once again in '95, it took me only 8 weeks to get into the band at school. Usually, it took students at that age probably about a year before they were asked to be a part of the band. And you know, I ended up getting accepted into All City Band, and I knew I was a very decent player, but they sat me fourth flute, fourth row, um, and that was very interested. And you know, they wanted to keep pushing me towards the back. I guess because they thought I wasn't a good player. But you know, I would listen to the other flute players that were in front of me, and I try not to judge, you know, at least now, you know, I try not to judge a player and say like, oh, I'm better than her. Or, you know, us musicians, we try not to think that way. Um, but, you know, at that age, you know, I guess being 11, I'm like, well, you know, why does that person has a whole bunch of air in her sound quality? Or, you know, why am I way back here? And, you know, I learned, you know, through loyalty and showing kind of like who you are and what else you can bring to the table in different settings, I think that's helped me. And being loyal to different groups has also helped me progress. But yes, I have experienced it many times. Also, you know, through different maybe competitions I may have competed in. So yes, I guess the answer would be yes.
Could you bring us up from the 11th grade and beyond to more recent times? Are you, in
Sure.
these last years, recent years, I mean, have you had that sense still that somehow you're being compartmentalized or being seen in a different light or something? Has there been
in
any
in in
experience?
some Yeah, in some institutions, national institutions and regional institutions that are geared around the flute, I would say that it exists, but I can also say that 2020 is a little bit better than it than 2000, let's say. And but you definitely still experience it. And but things are heading in the right direction, I'll say.
When you work with young kids now who are in
Yes.
4, 11 years old, who are in the 5th grade, whatever it is, do
Yes.
you sense an awareness in them as well, the way you felt it then? Has anything changed over this period of time, do you think?
Minimally, but I think it has changed. I think that, you know, with this newer generation, they're exposed to a little bit more than, for example, me. You know, when I was young, you know, I didn't really have the internet, or, you know, I was pretty much raised, you know, on Ravine Avenue in Glenwood, which is primarily, you know, black people, and some Hispanics. And, you know, in today's age, I think a lot of these kids, there isn't that much segregation, for example, in the schools. There's the neighborhoods are a little bit more culturally diverse. Go ahead.
Would you say again what you said about the segregation now?
I would say basically, you know, that some of the schools, for example, in Yonkers, where they had a huge segregation issue, that you're seeing more diversity in the schools versus back when I was going to school.
So
And
there is a motion in the right direction, you would say.
yes, and I mean, I can clearly speak with Yonkers and definitely about New York schools. I'm not sure exactly where else, like if we're in Kentucky or different other areas, but
Well, yeah,
yes.
I don't know much about Kentucky either, except they grow horses, I think. But
Yeah, something like that, right.
What other interests do you follow? What other kinds of music do you like? What do you do when you're not fluting?
Oh, when I'm not fluting, I love, you know, sports. I love basketball, track and bowling, a little bit of swimming. Um, I love politics. You know, I'm always up for a healthy conversation, and that's pretty much where my kind of like interests happen to be right now, and also just community. I've always been about the community. Um, Whether, you know, I worked at the Hudson River Museum for 10 years, which was a nonprofit, and that was always about the community and the Hudson River. And, you know, I really like different type of project-based things like that.
At the museum, did you involve yourself musically, or are you talking about other aspects of the community?
Oh, definitely. Well, all aspects, but yes, for sure, definitely musically. My first concert actually at the museum was with my first private teacher, Mary Ellen Sheffley, who's also from Westchester County. And we had a concert there with Heidi Upton, who's the pianist. And that was probably my first concert there. And that was somewhere around 2001, about 19 years ago. And yes, we put on an hour program, and it was great. And what's funny is that most recently, I was asked in January to put together a program called Follow the Flute. So I did an hour worth of music there, and it was great. You know, I touched on everything from Baroque to some improv. Actually, during the last piece, my father, I found out that he actually flew in, and you know, my stepmother, Lorana Phipps, they drove to the museum and saw me play, and it was a great warming experience. And I said, "Dad, did you bring your trumpet?" He said, "Oh, it's in the car." I said, "Oh, everybody, we're just going to take a 5-minute intermission." So I said, "Oh, Dad, yeah, go get the." So he came back, and there was a painting, and it was of 125th Street. It was a contemporary painting, and I pointed to it. I said, "Hey, Dad, just so you know, that's 125th Street." So he said, "Okay, say no more," and we just went. It was a great experience. Yeah. Yes.
Well, it brings up two different points. One is your dad, so I'll remember that. So I'll get back to that in a minute. But you mentioned improvisation. That's kind of a lost art in many ways. Not too many artists can do it, or are skilled at doing it, or are trained to do it.
Yes.
When you work with kids, is there a way of learning that? Is there a way of learning sight reading? Are all of these things natural gifts, or can you involve yourself in improving them?
Well, I think as long as you're always working, I say this in a lot of different areas, but as long as you're always working towards something positive, then you'll get a positive result, whether it be exactly what you expected or not. You know, if the baby's crawling, eventually they end up walking. And I believe that in the same way as it pertains to music. You know, so for example, sight reading, I was awful at sight reading. And one of my flute advisors down in New Orleans, her name is Janice Saslaw, sometimes it's just the simplest things that people may say. And one of the things that she always was consistent in telling me is just always keep pushing your eyes forward. Because sometimes what happens is when you're reading music, you may turn on your brain and you're like, oh, wait, what was that note? No, keep going. You're probably, in most instances, probably right, unless it's something that's like 180 beats per measure and it's going too fast and there's lots of accidentals and the key signature is awful. But in most cases, you know, you learn to have more trust in yourself and your eyes and just keep moving your eyes forward. Yeah.
Very good. And now I wanted to ask you about your dad. You mentioned him just now, and
Sure.
he's, as I gather, was involved with a very different sort of music. He played with Kool and the Gang and all that kind of stuff. So
Yes.
what in your background led to classical? I mean, how come you're not playing, I don't know, bowling, flute? I guess you could do that anyway, but.
Yeah, I mean, the beautiful thing about myself, and I guess for many different professional musicians or advanced musicians, is learning what your niche is, learning kind of like where you may belong and what about your playing makes you special, at least if you're maybe trying to make some money off of it. But, you know, one thing that I've learned is I have kind of like the ability to kind of like jump in different areas, and I add my own taste to it. For example, with improvisation, you know, a lot of jazz improv, I should say, you know, is based around theory and being very free. And I noticed that when I add improv to different music, it kind of has more of like a contemporary feel to it. Um, so, you know, it's not in the traditional, you know, chord changes with jazz music, but it kind of adds a little contemporary flair, which makes me different. And you know, I enjoy that. You know, I've played with my father with the Cosmic Crew, Michael Ray and the Cosmic Crew down in New Orleans. I played with them up here in different states, like for example, New Jersey. We were at the New Jersey. I forgot the name of the school actually, but the jazz ensemble there, they honored my father about 2 years ago, and we put on this amazing performance with the actual jazz ensemble, and it was a very interesting experience because in college they're taught strict jazz standards, and oh, you can't, you know, you should go to this chord after this, and you know, and once the jazz ensemble found out how really free it could be, because my father, his roots kind of derive also from Sun Ra, the Sun Ra Arkestra, and they play all different kinds of music, from classical. It's based really on cosmic Afrocentric music, and it's in the small corners and the depths of jazz that a lot of people don't dwindle in. So it's a very great experience. Yeah.
So do you play jazz? I mean, do you work in any kind of a steady jazz ensemble?
No, not at the moment. Right now, I've been kind of like freelancing, playing with different orchestras. I've played with different jazz ensembles, and you know, when I went to high school, and also at one point when I was at Westchester Community College, I played with that jazz ensemble at one point. I know Lehman is interested in having me play for a jazz ensemble, so who knows what the future may hold. So, you know, but yes, I love it. I love all mediums. Yeah.
It's so good to have that freedom, to have the ability to do and work in many different spheres.
Yes.
That's really great. It gives you, I guess, well, you mentioned the freedom that it gives you to approach all of these different elements. So that's great. That's great. Are there any plots and plans that you have that you might fill us in on? I mean, now it's so hard for musicians, I imagine, because they have no place they can play except on virtual, like we're having now at home. But eventually, when you get back, are you going to want to play concertos? I think you did play the Chaminade, did you, at some point?
Yes, I played the Chaminade Concertino with the Lehman Concert Band. Also, there's a summer band that's also written by Alan Hollander and Jill Weiss. And it's up in Scarsdale. We're actually going to start our summer series soon. It's a 7-week summer series. And yes, I played the Chaminade with them also. It's helped me win a few awards. So yes, definitely have.
But what I'm wondering, do you have any secret goals that you could tell us about when concerts are resumed, when audiences can congregate again? Are there plans that you have or thoughts that you have that you'd like to do, pieces you'd like to play, artists you'd like to work with?
Not specifically. Right now, I am pretty much, since everything has changed and it's been less live music and more kind of like recording and streaming online, I've kind of been trying to reconstruct my approach on music and my delivery to different audiences. In March, I found out, I had 60 gigs, 60 concerts canceled between now and January. So kind of filling the void in with reconstructing exactly, once again, how I approach music. But, a lot of things will be delivered online. There'll be more recordings. Possibly we'll be working on an album of my own in the spring of some contemporary and some of my favorite songs. Also, my father, with the Cosmic Crew, they're going to release something in the near future also. So, there's definitely some projects I have my ears open for. So I look forward to it.
What are some of your favorite songs?
Oh, there's so many. It's really a lot. Nothing in particular. They're all kind of like on the same line. So it's not too much that I like more than the other at this point.
But you obviously are attracted as well to contemporary classical pieces. And
yes, definitely. Because I like the different colors that the flute can add, with the different extended technique and how the 21st century composers are now challenging us a little bit more. So I'm always up for a challenge. So I'm always intrigued by it. Yes.
I suspect there's going to be some challenge in a piece you said you'd play for us.
Oh, sure. Yes. It's sure. It's called HYPNOSIS. It means a lot to me. I've only performed it a few times, but it's one of the last pieces that I had my grandmother listen to before she passed. She had passed 2 years ago of dementia, and she was always kind of like my rock. I always called her Tiger. And because she was 5 feet, but always stern and always supportive and had a lot of strength. And at 90 years old, when you're still doing your own cooking and cleaning and driving and swimming, and you're going to the bank and the supermarket and it's not even 12 yet, it's a blessing, in my eyes. So she was always just a source of inspiration to me. So it was one of the last songs that I actually played for her. So it means a lot to me. But yeah, it's called HYPNOSIS, and it's written by Ian Clark. And I'll play it for you right now.
Oh, great. What does the title refer to in particular? Your hypnosis? Are you hypnotized while you're playing, or you try to hypnotize us in the audience?
Well, one of the things with me, I'm usually kind of like an emotional player, or I guess I would put it that way. So it's definitely, I try to deliver that same emotion. And with hypnosis, one of the good things about it is I get a chance to kind of like play around with my vibrato a little bit, which is always fun. Yes.
Before you play the piece, could you show us what you mean by playing around with your vibrato?
Oh, sure. So If I just play a note without vibrato, it sounds like this. If I add vibrato, so it's kind of like, it's kind of like that wave motion in one sounds. And yeah, so I get, there's times when I may speed up my vibrato, there's times when I may slow down my vibrato, and kind of adds a little bit more color to the piece, which I like.
And these are your choices or the composers?
Oh, it's really my kind of like interpretation of the piece also. You know, everyone plays the piece slightly different, and they may take certain liberties in certain areas, swells in certain areas, kind of bending the note in certain areas. So yeah, that's pretty much how I can explain it to you.
Okay. Ian Black is a Englishman.
Ian, yes, Ian Clark. Yes, he's from
Yeah.
England. Yes.
Okay, let's listen to and be perhaps
Okay.
involved with hypnosis.
Okay, sure. getting emotional. I started thinking of my grandma, actually.
But again, very beautiful piece. So
Thank you.
quite aside from the beautiful way you played it, when you think of a modern flute piece, you don't think of something that has that kind of warmth. And the more hypnosis in a way came from the accompaniment, which kept repeating certain patterns. But it's very, very special, and I'm delighted to have heard it from first time for me. And it's just wonderful to be able to share these moments at home. I mean, you're at home,
Thank you, Bob.
I'm at home.
Yes,
And,
definitely.
we're both here together through the good offices of the Yonkers Philharmonic. So listen, let me thank you one more time for joining us, for giving us such a very special session. Any last thoughts or words or things that I forgot to ask you or you want to add?
Well, thank you, and I thank the Yonkers Philharmonic and the Fine Arts Orchestral Society for this opportunity, TONG, CHEN, and the different board members that made this possible. And I look forward to seeing you in the future, definitely.
Absolutely, that's what we're all hoping for, that we can hear the full orchestra in full power.
Definitely.
Many, many thanks again. It's been a joy being with you. I'm Bob Sherman. Thanks again so much.